I'll be. Going overseas?
Yeah.
Okay, before we get started, I'd like to make an announcement. If you're here on, as an interested party to special permit 18025, which is the commercial feedlot on West Woodstruck Road, there is a staff request to defer that item to the July 18th hearing date. If there's people here that would like to testify today, you will have that opportunity, though. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Okay, I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Lincoln-Lancaster County Planning Commission of June 20th, 2018. A printed agenda is available outside the hearing room, and a copy of the full agenda, including the staff reports, is available at the front of the chambers with the clerk. The Open Meetings Act is posted just inside the doors at the back of the room. If you parked in the parking garage across the street to the north, the gate is open and no parking coupons are necessary. Out of courtesy for those attending this meeting, the commissioners and the staff, cellular phone usage is not permitted in these chambers during any portion of this meeting, and we will appreciate your cooperation. Please note that the Planning Commission action is final on the following agenda items. Item 4.1D, special permit number 18021. Item 5.1B, special permit number 18019, and item 6.1, the county special permit number 18025, which Jerry just alluded to, and that there is a request for a 4-week deferral on that one. Any aggrieved person may appeal final action of the Planning Commission to the City Council or County Board by filing a notice of appeal with the clerk within 14 days following the action of the Planning Commission. Planning Commission action on all other items is a recommendation to the City Council or County Board. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the regular hearing held June 6, 2018. Is there a motion?
So moved, Beckius.
Second, Joy.
Please call the roll.
Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Share.
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0.
The next item of business is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be called at the same time and will not be scheduled for a separate public hearing unless there is a request from someone wishing to speak or at the request of a commission member. I will ask Jerry to read all of the consent agenda items into the record, and once those items are read, she will ask if there is anyone wishing to speak. If you wish to speak on an item on the consent agenda, we would ask that you stand and state that item. That item will then be removed from the consent agenda and scheduled as a separate public hearing under Section 3 of today's agenda. All items remaining on the consent agenda will be voted upon in total with a motion for approval. Jerry, will you please call the items on the consent agenda?
Yes, we have one item. Item 1.1 is change of zone number 18019 from H3 Highway Commercial District to R2 Residential District on property generally located at 1340 Furnace Avenue. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this item?
I see none.
Is there anyone here wishing to speak on this item? If so, please stand and state your interest.
I think we'll entertain a motion.
Move approval, Hove.
Second, Core.
Please call
Okay.
the vote.
Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0. Okay, go ahead, Dennis. I'm sorry.
I will now ask Jerry to call any requests for deferral received prior to this meeting.
Okay, the county attorney's office is recommending that the planning commission defer the public hearing on agenda item 6.1, which is county permit number 18025, to the July 18th, 2018 hearing to allow for resubmittal of the legal newspaper notice and re-notification of property owners referencing the correct address. A 4-week deferral is being requested as the next regular hearing date would normally be held on July 4th, and due to the holiday, there is no hearing. So we need a motion for deferral.
Move to defer until 7/18/18.
Second, Edgerton.
With comment taking place today if needed.
Yes, and we'll do that right
Right.
after we vote,
Okay.
yeah. So I think we're ready to vote.
Okay. This is on a 4-week deferral of special permit 18025. Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0.
Is there anyone wishing to testify on either of these applications rather than waiting until the July 18th hearing?
This is for special permit 18025 in the commercial
The
feedlot.
commercial feedlot.
Commercial feedlot. If there's anyone here who wishes to testify today instead of July 18th, now's the time. Would you?
I'm not sure what to do here. I'm not able to be here on the 18th.
Yeah, so,
Yep,
so
come
come
on
up
up.
and give your name and address, and then give your testimony.
But to clarify, if they testify today, they're not allowed to testify on the 18th, is that right?
I
Yep,
would
just
assume
right
that
up
you
there
would
Yeah,
at
want
you
the
can come
microphone.
up to the mic.
Perfect.
I just want recorded that I'm opposing for this request to have this done. I do not want the feedlot to be approved. It's across from my property, not very far. It'd be my view from out of my home. I'm concerned for water. I'm wondering, we use well water, so I'm concerned if this big commercial company comes in there, how's it gonna affect my family and the people around me as far as what we're gonna use for water. I'm concerned for the roads there. It's a bus route on the road that they'd be coming in, that my children are on. And my one son does drive, and there's big trucks coming on there, concerned with them on this road also, with that many commercial vehicles possibly coming over to this business. But so that can be recorded. Those are the things that I'm concerned about.
Appreciate it. Questions?
We need your name
Jerry,
and
your name.
Name and
address.
address, please.
Oh, okay.
My name is Heather L. Lomax, Lomax,
And your address.
12601 West Whitstruck Road, Crete, Nebraska.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
John Paul Jameson, 2610 South 24th Street, Lincoln. I own a piece of property that shares a property line with the aforementioned piece of property, and I am adamantly opposed about the construction of the feedlot, based basically just on environmental reasons and also the primarily the property value impact that it's going to have on my property. So I do have some stuff here that I would just like to present to for knowledge.
Okay. Are there numerous copies or just one? Okay, okay.
You get 5 minutes.
But that's it. Thank
Okay.
you.
Questions?
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll attach these to the record. Thank you.
Others? Okay. I think that we are ready to move on. So we will now proceed to public hearings. The staff will make a brief presentation, and then the applicant will then be requested to present his or her testimony, followed by those who wish to testify in support, and then followed by those who wish to testify in opposition. The staff will then be given an opportunity to respond to the testimony, and then the applicant shall have an opportunity to, for rebuttal. Each person testifying should state their name and address and shall have 5 minutes to speak unless additional time is requested and granted. The timer will go off after 4 minutes. Then you will have 1 minute to wrap up your testimony. The Planning Commission will vote immediately at the close of the public hearing unless the commission votes to defer action or continue the public hearing. Jerry, please call the first public hearing item.
Okay, there's 4 associated items. First one being 4.1A, Comprehensive Plan Conformance 18009, to review as to conformance with the 2040 Lincoln Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan, a request to declare approximately 13,163 square feet, more or less, of the Missouri Pacific Trail property as surplus on property generally located between South 95th and South 97th Street on the north side of A Street. Staff recommendation is for conformance. Item 4.1B is annexation number 18001 for the annexation and development of approximately 103.07 acres. Item 4.1C is changes zone 18006 from AG Agricultural District to R3 Residential District. And item 4.1D is special permit number 18021 for community unit plan with 290 residential dwelling units on approximately 96.1 acres with requested waivers. All of these are located generally at South 93rd Street and A Street. The Planning Commission action is final for special permit 18021 unless appealed to the City Council within 14 days. Staff recommendation on the special permit is conditional approval. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these agenda items?
I see none. George?
Thank you, George Wesselhoff, Planning Department. So where we're at, we're on A Street. This is 98th, south of the existing Hillcrest Heights subdivision. And there are, as Jerry mentioned, the 4 related applications. I'm briefly going to review the annexation and change of zone, and then the CPC, and then finally the special permit application for the CUP. So the request is for annexation of 103.07 acres, which would include parcels on both the north and south side of A Street. It also includes part of the existing Hillcrest Golf Course land where the clubhouse, pool, and improved area is located, but excluding the main course. And this is included so that city services can be provided to the clubhouse, but otherwise the Hillcrest Golf Course is not proposed or involved in the community unit plan. So the change of zone comprises 96.18 acres. It's also inclusive of parcels on both the north and south side of A Streets. It excludes the clubhouse of the golf course. It does include this property owned by B&J south of Hillcrest Heights subdivision, which has already been annexed but has not been changed as far as the zoning. In terms of infrastructure, the sanitary sewer is one of the key pieces here. The city's Stevens Creek Trunk Sewer project is expected to be completed by June of 2019. And the extension to serve the proposed Hillcrest CUP area is in the 2021-2022 proposed CUP. So that's a significant piece of infrastructure. There is water planned, a 16-inch water main in A Street from Smoky Hill Road to the west is planned to 93rd Street, and that would be by March of 2019. There's presently not a water main in 98th Street, but that is not needed to service the development. So I would mention that there is an associated annexation agreement that would go before the City Council, and that would set forth criteria pertaining to the sewer, infrastructure improvements for the intersections, arterial street sidewalk improvements, and it includes this area that I showed initially, which is described in the agreement as Phase 1. There's also a Phase 2, which is not included in the immediate request, that would be to the west on the south side of A Street. And so these requests will be consistent with the comprehensive plan, the areas identified for residential development at urban densities, and can be served by city services. In terms of the CPC request, the area in question is you can call it a bump out, or it's an area of excess right-of-way of the former Missouri Pacific Railroad, which is now the Mopac Trail, located on the north side of A Street. And so this is proposed as a land trade, where in exchange for the surplus property, the developer will be dedicating a similar area of size between the proposed vacation and 98th Street in order to provide future trail corridor. And so the benefit to the developer is that this area in question can be utilized as part of their drainage planning, whereas the benefit to the city is that with the land in exchange, when the trail would be relocated to the north side of A Street in the future, we would have that necessary area. So in terms of the community unit plan, again, we're in an area comprised of 96.18 acres on both the north and south sides of A Street. And there are, as part of the community unit plan, 290 residential units proposed, including single-family detached, single-family attached, and townhouse units. Access for the development will include one full access intersection at South 93rd and A Street. There would be right-in intersections, right-out intersections at 91st and the south side of A Street, as well as at Hillcrest Trail and 98th Street. I'll get a graphic up here that shows that proposed CUP. So the intersections that I mentioned would be at 93rd and A Street, South 91st again, and then ultimately East Hillcrest Trail at 98th. In terms of density, the CUP includes, as I mentioned, 290 dwelling units, which is an appropriate urban density. A CUP in the R3 district is permitted at a maximum density of 6.96 dwelling units per acre, which equates to 669 dwelling units if they would do an ultimate total build-out. So they're well under the proposed density in terms of the total number of units. The proposal from the developer was that there would be 379 unassigned units. However, staff, as part of the conditions, is recommending 100 assigned dwelling units, which would be more consistent with a single-family subdivision. There were a number of waivers, or several waivers being requested, which includes subdivision waivers for block length and lot lines being radial and not being radial and perpendicular to the street. There's also zoning ordinance waivers requested pertaining to corner lots and setbacks in some of the areas, as well as design standard waivers. I would mention that the developer did hold an informational meeting in early April, on April 3rd, and that meeting was attended by several nearby residents, including from Hillcrest Heights to the north, and they did express concerns about traffic and the type of residential use proposed next to Hillcrest Heights. I would mention, in terms of street connectivity, there will be connections. In addition to those intersection improvements, there'll be connections to the existing Hillcrest Heights. There'll be a connection to the LPS property to the west when that would be developed. There'll be a connection to the Whitehorse development to the west. So traffic would be dispersed once those connections are made. In addition, one of the conditions of approval is to place a temporary barricade at the eastern terminus of East Hillcrest Drive so as to limit construction traffic through Hillcrest Heights. And that would remain in place until such time that there was the street connection to A Street. I would mention that the developer is working, as we speak, on addressing the Public Works watershed management comments. There were some areas where additional information was needed. The developer has been providing that information, and Public Works watershed management is reviewing. So at that point, I could answer any questions you may have.
Questions for George? Maya?
Just one, on the CUP, where you said the ultimate build-out proposed was 379 unassigned, and you're recommending 100 unassigned dwelling units. How do you calculate that? What is appropriate for phase 2 or whatever that would be?
I think it was just felt that 100 was more consistent with a development that mostly is single family, as opposed to if you had a development with a CUP where you had more multiple family or a higher level of density. I think the overall density is less than 50%, and they're not proposing some of the higher densities that could otherwise be allowed.
So it's not a formula with the land area or anything. It's just kind of a number that you think is appropriate. So it has nothing to do with an equation or a formula of dividing the land mass into certain.
No, there's not a specific formula. It's just a general number that staff recommended.
Okay.
Hi, George. I've got several questions. First, I'm going to start with the bike trail, the MOPAC.
Sure.
They talked about having a speed table. Can you tell me what that is?
I might have to defer either to Sarah Hartzell with Parks and Recreation or the developer's representative on that question.
Sarah, do you want to come up?
Excuse me, George. Sarah Hartzell, Parks and Rec. Speed tables are one of many tools that we can use to try to kind of slow and calm traffic inside of a neighborhood. It's called a table because it's kind of a flat spot in the roadway. So not a speed bump where you just kind of go over it, but you kind of rise up onto it, go across it, and then drop back down again. It's a way of getting the attention of the driver, and you know, anything that's a little bit different in the roadway generally will make people slow down a little. There are other techniques with different types of paint. We've got a couple examples around town of the RRFBs, the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. So there are lots of different tools that you can use. That's one that we talked about.
What do they mean by the trail counter? I noticed that was in there too.
We have 5 trail counters in the city. These are devices that are actually embedded in the trail surface itself. The one that they're talking about is over by the trailhead on 84th Street, and they keep count of both the pedestrian and the bicycle usage of the trails.
So I'm going to go back to that speed table. So are they wanting that on that 93rd Street crossing with the trail?
When we spoke about it, we were speaking more about the new crossing. So the 93rd Street crossing is actually already existing. It's the Hillcrest Golf Course driveway. This new crossing is the one that we were discussing. The one that's on the Hillcrest driveway, it's going to be very close to the roundabout. Traffic should be really slow through that spot. People should be going maybe 15, 20 miles per hour at that point. So just a regular crosswalk would probably be appropriate there.
And I want to make sure that I understand this right with this property switch. Mm-hmm. So right now the trail crosses A Street, and probably from, I don't know the street number, but 93rd to 98th is on the south side, the other portion's on the north side.
Right.
Is it the goal to have that south portion to 98th Street all on the north side, or where is it going to cross when this is all done?
Right. So you're right. The crossing right now is right about at this point. It's not a great crossing. Actually, if I could put this, there we go. That doesn't really do it justice, but the gravel comes up, the limestone path comes up to that point and then crosses kind of at a diagonal to get across. And we always want people to cross at a right angle if at all possible, because that way they can see to both sides easily. Nobody's looking back over their shoulder. So ultimately, it would be best to get that crossing rearranged so that it could be straightened out, get it to a point where the traffic levels are going to be as slow as we can get them. So a roundabout would be a great place to have that crossing. There is a roundabout planned at 98th Street eventually, but it's down the road a bit, and I don't believe they're planning on doing any changes with this project. We could, at this time, run the trail along the north side to 98th Street and just do an at-grade crossing at 98th. Under most circumstances, that probably wouldn't be a bad idea because we've got a stop sign on the south side. We'll have some control there. However, in this particular case, the high point in the roadway is just to the east of that intersection. So traffic going east and west, which doesn't stop, if they were coming towards the west, they would not really be able to see that intersection until they were right on it. So we felt like keeping it at the location that it's at right now, give enough sight distance for the vehicle so that it was safer for the cyclists. And then when that roadway gets changed, the grades will be worked out so that those sight distances are addressed and we slow the traffic down at that roundabout.
So it is going to move to the north side.
That would be the
whenever
ultimate.
98th Street develops.
Right.
Okay, and then I just wanted to make sure the developer is going to pay for paving the trail from 84th to 98th.
That was part of the original discussion. When the developer originally started looking at this area, they were very proactive in coming to the bicycling community. This trail has a lot of history. It's part of the heritage of the trail system in Lincoln. This was a part of trail. The railroad was surplusing it. The city couldn't move fast enough and the county couldn't move fast enough to purchase it themselves. A group of homeowners came and mortgaged their own homes to purchase this property and be able to donate it then to the NRD at the time for development into a trail. So it's a really important piece of trail to a lot of people. And the developer recognized that. They came forward to the biking community, both Great Plains Trails Network and the Pedestrian Bicycle Advisory Committee, and had several discussions with them about, what should we do in this place? You can also see that it cuts through at a pretty awkward angle for development, and so there was some benefit to rearranging that trail so that the developer could have a more developable parcel, crossings would be safer, and part of that agreement, and actually part of the agreement that we entered into with the NRD, when we took possession of this land, was that if and when these trails were relocated, that they would be built to city standards, and that would be paved to 10-foot concrete. And as we went through that, that was part of the conversation. We had a list of items that the bicycling community wanted to see, most of which the developer was agreeable to. Since then, the plans have changed, and that's not being relocated, so it'll just remain as a limestone trail for now. And we'll put it on our list for an upgrade.
Okay. So the trail is gonna be open at all times except for when that paving happens? Like this development construction isn't gonna close the trail?
I would assume that the only time that it would be closed would be when there was actually construction of those crossings. There won't be any construction on the trail itself except at those points.
Okay. Okay, I'm done with you.
Okay.
Okay, George. I might save these for the developer. Sorry.
It's okay. Other questions? George?
One.
Tom?
George, on your amended staff report, you struck the requirement to provide a street connection to the Kidwell property. But then during your testimony, did you refer to the Kidwell property as Phase 2?
Correct, but both of those are correct. So there would have been, initially we were recommending a street connection kind of in the southwest corner of the Phase 1 proposed CUP, but there's two constraints. There's a transmission line easement, and then there's flood zone, which effectively makes that less practical. But you're also right that that property to the west would be part of Phase 2, which is not part of the current proposal.
So then is Phase 2, although not part of the current proposal, anticipating development south of the channel?
I might defer that question to the developer's representative.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for George? Okay, thanks, George.
Thank you.
Testimony from the applicant?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Tom Houston. My address is 233 South 13th Street, Suite 1900, here in Lincoln, on behalf of the developers. With me today is Brad Marshall, who's a project engineer from Olson Associates that's been working on this project. I'm here on behalf of the East A Street Coalition, which is comprised of 7 property owners along this corridor, including Heritage Lakes LLC, BC LINC LLC, B&J Partnership, David Rawlis, and East O Realty, which is actually the title holder for Hillcrest Country Club. All of those property owners are part of the Phase 1 coalition that really include all the property on the north side of A Street plus the Rawlis property on the south side of A Street. In addition, the members of the coalition include Chris Kidwell, who owns approximately 70 acres on the south side of A Street, and then Homestead Acres, which owns 7 acres. So there's an additional 77 acres on the south side of A Street that will be coming along later. First, a moment on the coalition itself. Obviously, it's much better from a planning perspective to bring a large area forward through the city process to consider annexation and change of zone. And that's why we have assembled approximately 180 acres as a part of this process between the 2 phases. Much more comprehensive than doing on an individual approach. The 3 requests in front of you, as explained by George, is accurate. The annexation, the statutory standard for the city of Lincoln really is the property has to be contiguous, and this property that is in front of you on your agenda today is contiguous on 3 of the sides and is appropriate for annexation. In addition to that, the City of Lincoln, as a part of its comprehensive plan, has adopted a annexation policy that requires that the property be capable of receiving municipal services, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but the property is also in that position. So the annexation itself, one of the questions would be raised is, why is this property coming forward now? And the answer is pretty simple, is that because of the extension of the Stevens Creek trunk line, really through the Stevens Creek drainage basin to approximately 98th and Van Dorn Street allows this property to come on. In my view, it's low-hanging fruit for the city of Lincoln. It's about 180 acres that would be coming into the city with low marginal additional costs. As mentioned by George, the water line is easily extendable from the west, and it will be at this site in approximately 1 year. And then, as a part of the annexation agreement that we've been negotiating with the city, we are making additional infrastructure and road improvements to A Street to provide access to the property. On the annexation itself, I just want to mention a couple things. The staff report talks about that this property is capable of receiving the full range of municipal services because of the annexation, and this annexation is in full compliance with the annexation of policy adopted by the city. The only condition of approval for the annexation really deals with the required approval and signature of the annexation agreement, which we have, I would say 98% complete. It's probably not quite there, but we're getting real close, and hopefully it'll be finished up to go forward with these matters, the change of zone and the annexation towards city council. The change of zone, I think this property is very consistent with the comprehensive plan designation. Obviously, the comprehensive plan envisioned the city of Lincoln was going to be moving into the Stevens Creek drainage basin. This property itself is notified or designated as a Tier 1 Priority B property, and does the comprehensive plan future land use map does designate it as urban density. And I'll talk about density in a moment. I guess in conclusion on the change of zone, I would say that the R3 is most appropriate for this property based upon the consistency with the comprehensive plan. Now, the special permit, which are the site plans on the overhead, there's a couple things that I did want to talk about. First of all was the waivers. There are 8 waivers that are required. The staff report indicates that they are typical and justified. Several of those waivers are really required because of the design of the subdivision around the Mopac Trail, and to make that connection and to deal with the block length issues that are raised because of that accommodation. The density issue that is really raised by the community unit plan gets kind of confusing. You'll see that overall we have planned for 290 dwelling units. There's several different standards, one of which is the comprehensive plan designation indicates that the 2040 comprehensive plan indicates there should be an aspiration of 5 dwelling units per acre. We think that's too many for this location. The design standard for the R3 CUP design approach is 6.96 dwelling units per acre, and that's way too many dwelling units for this neighborhood. So consequently, over the 90 acres, we have approximately 3 dwelling units per acre, approximately 100 acres for this phase 1 property, which is, as I mentioned, it equates to about 3 dwelling units per acre, which we think is much more appropriate for this neighborhood. That design consideration is really mentioned in special condition of approval 2.1.1. There's a couple other things that I did want to mention before my time runs out. George had mentioned that at this location there will be a temporary barricade, and that is really designed to prevent the construction traffic from using those existing streets while construction is occurring. That's found in a special condition 2.1.2. Special condition 2.1.5 is in the modified conditions of approval that really requires this CUP to create its own buffer. That lot that would be adjacent to the existing neighborhood would be required to have a 100-foot width to really create one additional buffering lot to the neighborhood to the north. Conditions 2.110 and 2.111 both deal with pedestrian easements in the attempt to deal and make sure that the neighborhood is compatible with the Mopac Trail. Lastly, the other thing I was going to mention, George mentioned that there was a neighborhood meeting. I was not able to participate, but there was a neighborhood meeting that occurred on April 3rd. There was a subsequent meeting with the Association Board of Directors on April 17th. There was a planned meeting in May, but it got deferred till June 28th, so there's another meeting next week with the neighborhood. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. I know Tracy has some.
Okay, so let's start with that buffer that you're talking about, that kind of area there.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have to put those types of developments in that location? Could we move, could you switch that somewhere else? Is there some reason why you put those right next to Hillcrest Heights?
It's really some of the topographic challenges for the property, and that was probably the property that was best situated for the townhome development itself. Notwithstanding that, my client was agreeable ultimately to the creation of their single buffering lot of 100-foot width. Many of these lots are 100 foot in width, and there's a dearth of available building lots in East Lincoln, and that's one of the reasons this matter is going forward right now. Is that you heard Mr. Wesselhoff mention that the connecting sewer trunk line between this property and the Stevens Creek line is in the CIP for 2021-2022. Our annexation agreement allows this coalition to go ahead and construct that line at its own cost, subject to reimbursement by the CIP 3 years hence. And it is anticipated that my clients would like to be able to start grading yet this year. So that's why we're moving forward at this point.
Now, there is some confusion when I was reading the letters that some of the neighbors sent in. Some of them called them fourplexes, and then in the staff report, it calls townhomes. Can you just kind of address that and kind of explain what's going in there?
I think a lot of them are probably synonymous, because really how I view it is that they're single-family attached housing, and they're on a smaller footprint. They're usually, have common areas together. That they usually have an association that provides services, and there's a high need for that kind of housing. And whether there's 2 units or 4 units or 5 units, I think they're all single-family attached housing, and that's how that's how they're characterized in the land use plan. So.
Okay, so they're not, like an apartment fourplex type situation?
There could be a fourplex, but it's still a single-family attached housing. That there could be 4 units connected, but separately subdivided and separately owned.
Okay. All right, so now, going somewhere else here.
All right.
How many existing homes are in this area right now? I noticed that there was some mention about, from the staff report, that there are some that need to be demolished, some that need their house addresses changed once this happens.
So of the 280 acres, how many homes exist right now? That's a good question. I'm going to guess 3 or 4. There is one property that is occupied or occupiable that will require an address change, because I think its address is probably A Street, and it's not going to have that address moving forward. So there will be required to change that address. But and I'm sitting here thinking about it, I can only think of one house on the north side, but there may be more.
So any present homes right now would be torn down for this development except for maybe the one, or is that going to be?
There is one that exists right here, if you can see that outline of a house right there. Brad may know how many homes there are.
Good afternoon, Brad Marshall with Olson Associates. There will just be one remaining house, and after the approval of this plan, I do believe everything actually has been demolished. There were other homes, so I kind of just hatched outline here. There was another home that was sitting about that location that's been since demolished, or being planned to be demolished. The other home is this one here. That is a residence that is part of one of the owners, that they bought that, and they are going to redo the lots around that home to sell. So when it comes to like an address change, one of the coalition members actually owns that, and they're agreeable to reassociate that address when the time comes.
Okay. Thanks for coming up, because
Yeah, no
I
problem.
think you're going to want to answer these questions. Can you tell me the difference between the rural roundabout and just a regular roundabout?
I can. So the concept is really to utilize the existing infrastructure. So the existing asphalt roadway that's there today, 24-foot wide shoulders, rural ditches on the sides. And so the concept is that we can go in, widen, grade and widen those to accommodate a roundabout. And then what we call tack on, but basically add curb onto the asphalt. So They'll go in, mill, overlay this. The whole thing will look brand new from the beginning to the end of the infrastructure. And that's really what it is. It's not, instead of where you may have an arterial roadway designed for the city of Lincoln, take out the asphalt, because an asphalt is not an acceptable material, full depth asphalt, but we may see some of those changes soon. But they would replace it with concrete, Portland concrete, and regrade it, maybe elevated to a future elevation. So the concept here is to utilize as much as we possibly can and still create a safer intersection for the development and people traveling on A Street.
So it's really just more about material use than kind of anything else?
It is.
Okay.
And some of the conditions that we've been working with engineering services on is to add sidewalks adjacent to the development, which would not be typical in rural section environment.
Okay.
Tracy, I may just give you a second to compose your thoughts, and I'll make a comment on the quadplexes or the fourplexes. Or this concept was relatively envisioned upon some of the first concepts, and I know this application's been delayed some time since the first site plan and everything. We talked about the trail relocation. So when this was brought forward, this whole corner was going to be a higher density area. Now that we're working around it, the clients do believe that this, well, and I'll call them townhomes, because townhomes are what, by city definition, these apply to. So they are individual lots. They are to be to be owned by somebody that is using these properties. And so we've seen these around Lincoln where they just have had significant interest. 40th Yankee Hill north of Target area kind of went dormant for a little while, and they're booming. 84th and Highway 2, quadplex development down there, and there's just a really good market for them, and people are, it's a different market instead of the single family that are being applied to the rest of the development here.
Thank you.
I think I'm done for right now.
Okay, other questions?
Yeah. Tom or Brad, did you guys talk about the removal of the connection to the Kidwell property south of the channel that exists there? And then maybe what the plans are for phase 2 in terms of development south of the channel?
Yeah, I can. So the removal of that connection was presented to staff such that with the Wandering Creek development, the Wandering Creek PUD, which doesn't extend that far, but conceptual plans have been provided. So the area in question really comes into this particular area.
Can you decrease the size so we can see?
Absolutely. I'm going to switch maps. So this map doesn't show the conceptual layout down here, but there would essentially be a street at that location where my pen is. And so there would be a connectivity provided to the Kidwell property just 100 feet so south of that intersection. The other kind of the other component of this is that there is an overhead line. LES substation sits in this vicinity adjacent to A Street, where there is an overhead line running down to about the corner of the property of this CUP, and then it shoots diagonal towards 84th Street. So with particularly the overhead lines contend with us well, staff, I believe, agreed to moving or not requiring the connection piece on this property, because it could be adequately provided in the future on the adjacent property.
And the other thing I would add to that is that the Kidwell property is really part of the Phase 2 property, and we envision we're going to be able to have to address the connection between the neighborhoods as a part of the CUP at that point, too.
Is the property owner to the south of Phase 1 a part of the coalition today? So, and if not, then I guess you're making a leap to anticipate that they will become so?
Mr. Kidwell owns approximately 70 acres there, and actually he has some of the property that's actually in the Wandering Creek development to the south off Van Dorn Street. And it's just, it depends upon the drainage basin in which it resides, or the sub-basin.
Yeah, so actually, the Kidwell property was part of the Van Dorn Coalition, and now the remaining portion that is served by the sanitary sewer district basically is being brought in as part of the East A Coalition. So I think you're asking the property directly south of, which would be, I call this the Rawless property, but south of the Rawless property, are they part of it? No, they're not part of this coalition. But the conceptual plans have been provided to planning, part of the overall PD layout, that there is a street connection shown there.
Right.
So we
But they're
utilize
currently not
that.
a part of your coalition.
They're not.
And I think that's one of the comments in the staff report too, is that we have to show the outline, the potential, the conceptual layout of that property to the
Right.
south, so.
Sure, no, I mean, and you have, it's just being used by a property owner that's not a part of your coalition
Yeah.
today.
It's always one of the challenges. That's why it's helpful to come in as a big, large coalition to show how the neighborhoods are going to connect and the blocks are going to connect and the streets are going to connect, so.
No other question? Anybody else?
Okay, I've got some more. Some of the waivers for, like the side lots and front and back, decreasing those, are those only applying to the corner lots, or are they applying to, I was a little confused there.
So like some of the front side yard reductions primarily are in the area of these single-family attached lots. So the street layout and so forth, where we know the particular type of townhome there is going to be placed there, or single-family attached, I should say again. We asked for the waiver, a reduction in the side yard, street side yard to call it, reduction. So it is, those are particular to those lots there.
So all of them, not just the corners?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, double frontage lots, if you will.
okay. It talks about, in one of those waivers, a flag lot, and I see which one it was talking about. Are you calling it a flag lot because of the shape of it? Is that?
A flag lot generally probably narrows down, and it is this corner here where it narrows down, and then only a portion, like a driveway, would be the portion of the property fronting a public street. We have looked over the comments, and we've advised to change the plan to not create a flag lot, and so that you have lots fronting that street more appropriately. So we would be meeting that condition by staff.
Okay.
Staff's recommendation.
And then, they talk about the right in, the right out, and at 93rd, I'm pretty sure that's being accomplished by the roundabout. But then they also talk about it at, I think, 91st Street. Is that going to be a roundabout too, or how are you accomplishing that right in, right out?
It's a good question, because that's kind of hard to accomplish with just a rural section roadway. So as part of the design of the roundabout, as you come out, so the west leg of that roundabout, there will be an island. That island will actually be extended to the west boundary of the CUP. And so that, so you'll have an island extending from the roundabout to the west property line, which would prohibit anybody coming out of that south street to turn left. And that was something we worked with engineering services to accommodate.
Sure, okay, I assumed medians as well, so that's, okay, good. I think that's it right now.
Okay, any other questions for Tom or Brad?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This time, we will now take testimony in support of these items together. There's 4 items. We'll take testimony in support of any of the 4, any or all. Okay? I don't see any, so now we'll take testimony in opposition to these items, any or all.
Hello, my name is Terry Neddenrip. My wife and I live at 550 Anthony Lane, and I currently serve as president of Hillcrest Heights Neighborhood Association, and am here speaking on behalf of the interests of all 49 homeowners in the neighborhood. Our neighborhood is not opposed generally to the development as noted in 4.1D. This is just south of our Hillcrest Heights neighborhood. As a recently annexed neighborhood with very close proximity to the city, we expect development to occur on all available properties near us. However, we would like to express opposition to the fourplex units currently being proposed for the Speedway property immediately abutting our neighborhood to the south. You may recall from the annexation process that our development is made up of 1 acre lots with single-family housing. And this neighborhood is rural in nature. The contrasting neighborhood designs would not transition well. The high density created by the fourplex units would negatively, we feel, affect Hillcrest Heights by, first, leading to increased traffic through our neighborhood. And while there are roundabouts planned south onto A Street, residents of this area will still more likely take the more direct route north to O Street through our neighborhood. And our streets are not designed for heavy traffic. And then second, the high density would create an extreme contrast in residential design from one neighborhood to the next. Nearly all the concerns that have been expressed by those in our neighborhood could be addressed by limiting the development abutting our neighborhood to only single-family houses. And as a final matter, in reviewing the related documents that were part of this proposal posted online, we noticed that some of the letters submitted by our neighbors, including mine, were not included, and thus we assume they were not provided for your review. So we've just noticed that a couple of days ago, and so we made copies, and I have those here now to share with you, so I'll leave those. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, I do have some. So I know that the developer has been working with you, and kind of as a compromise, they've offered this 100-foot buffering lot. How do you guys feel about that?
Well, 100 foot sounds like a lot, but it's still, the proximity is still an issue between our neighborhood and the new development. So, yeah, we're glad to hear that. We're pleased that there's efforts that direction, but it seems minimal.
So you would still like to have more of a buffer?
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks. I'll leave these copies here.
Actually, I have a copy of like 4 different letters. I'm not sure.
Okay. Can I leave these?
Sure,
Take them.
absolutely.
Thanks.
It didn't show up online when we looked.
Okay, all right, I'll check that out.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Mary Bell Avery. My husband, Stan Campbell, and I have lived on an acreage at 1111 East Hillcrest Drive for the past 22 years. And I understand that the letter I sent to the Planning Commission on June 5th was labeled as neutral. That's probably my error. Obviously, I need to correct that because I am speaking in opposition to at least a part of this CUP. And just so you know where I live, if I can share this. So my home is the one right here, the most southern lot next to the B&J property. And we're on the west side of the street of East Hillcrest Drive. But first I'd like to begin by thanking the Planning Department staff, in particular George Wesselhoft, for their efforts to answer our questions and provide information throughout the annexation process and now the development process. They have been very helpful and we appreciate that. Our concerns, which I'll reiterate what Terry said to some degree, but considering where my lot is, are even more concerned for my husband and I and our neighbor across the street, the Kennedys. the major increase in density of the housing units that will be immediately adjacent to our rural acreage development. According to the CUP application we were provided, it stated there would be 40 dwellings, whether you call them fourplexes or townhomes, whatever, that's 40 places that individual families will live on approximately 7 acres of land owned by B&J. And with my math, this would allow a high-density development of about 5.7 dwellings per acre to be built directly next to an established rural development, which has at most 1 dwelling per acre. So we are pleased that the planning department staff has recognized this concern, and they are recommending a condition for approval that requires, quote, 1 single-family residential lot instead of 4 lots for townhouses adjacent to Hillcrest Heights on the east side of East Hillcrest Drive, end quote. It took me a while to figure out where that was, and George helped me figure it out, and that's on the other side of Hillcrest Drive from where we live. It's where currently there's a home that's going to be torn down, I believe. However, we believe, my husband and I, that the same condition needs to be required also on the west side of East Hillcrest Drive, which is immediately south of our property. The current condition recommended in the staff report that would benefit my husband and I is to add an outlot that is 20 feet wide to our south property line with the intent to provide a front yard setback between our house or our yard and the proposed Cordova Street. And we do appreciate this recognition that there's a need for land use transition between our low-density acreage neighborhood and the high-density B&J development. But we believe the extreme change in density that would still exist adjacent to our property should be mitigated by requiring 1 single-family residential lot instead of 4 lots for townhouses, as is recommended on the east side of East Hillcrest. The single buffering lot I only heard about today, and now I think I see where that is. And if I'm looking at that correctly, it would be south of the Cordova Drive, and I hope someone will correct me if I'm wrong, that lot labeled number 1 would have an extra 100 feet in width. I assume that's what this means. And the question that Ms. Kaur asked, is that not sufficient? There's a hill. The highest point, when I look south, is probably about where their 3rd or 4th lots are.
Can you point it out on the map?
Yeah, I'm
that's
sorry.
in here?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I meant to do that. Okay. So I'm assuming this is the buffering right here. See, this one's much wider than the others. So they've added, and I do appreciate that, but the highest point, I believe, is around here at 3 and 4. So when I stand in my driveway and look, that extra 100 feet won't make much difference. And the idea, again, it's not so much the view, but it's the number of people, it's the density, and having that many people so close. Thank you.
Questions?
So you are saying that you would like the buffer to go kind of to that hill where they have single-family homes, or?
That would be wonderful. But I understand they need to, if there are only 7 acres there for B&J to develop, I totally understand why they're trying to make it as dense as they can. But I do appreciate that they recognize that doesn't fit well with our neighborhood. So my thought that I seemed reasonable based upon what the planning department's recommended on the east side to have a single family lot as a transition. Why not also have one on the west side, which would be due south of my house?
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Hi, my name is Jenny Limbach. I live at 918 East Hillcrest Drive. Before I read what I had stated, I want to point out the terminology in regards to fourplex, quads, single-family homes. We're not necessarily, those terms kind of coincide with each other. and they're using that they're single-family homes, when in all actuality they're attached single-family homes, which provides higher density of the amount of people living in one space. And if you look on the development's plan, they're already providing that in this southern portion down here. And all that we're simply saying is we're most concerned about this northern portion because that's what's adjacent to us. We're not concerned about a higher density down here. I just wanted to point out again, like many of my neighbors have said, is that I'm not opposed to the development as a whole, and we're not naive to think that as Lincoln grows, there won't be development surrounding our neighborhood. In fact, our neighborhood has already experienced a lot of changes within the last year. We've had commercial and residential dwellings being constructed to the north. There's a new retirement home that opened to our northern entrance. We were involuntarily annexed to the city of Lincoln, and now the proposed CUP plan to the southern end of Hillcrest Heights. However, we do feel that conditions could be made to avoid having this CUP development negatively impact the rural culture of Hillcrest Heights. As we have expressed to city planning as well as to the developers, if high-density quad, fourplex units, whatever they're called, are limited to the southern portion of the CUP rather than near Hillcrest Heights, many of our concerns could be avoided while still allowing the developers a range of housing options for people that are going to be moving and purchasing in this area. As my neighbors have already pointed out, there are many issues with high density close to our proximity to Hillcrest Heights, but I want to primarily highlight the traffic concerns that this could potentially provide. If fourplex units are constructed on Hillcrest Hill, which is primarily the B&J portion of the property. The first traffic concern is safety. Due to the rural nature of our neighborhood, homes do not have fences. The streets are only 22 feet wide, which is narrower than city standards. And we do not contain sidewalks. Therefore, when my family and my neighbors go for walks, we are walking on the street. This is a particular concern for me as a pet owner as well as a mother of young children. Due to our streets being a dead end and containing low traffic at this point, it is not currently an issue walking on the streets. However, if higher density units are constructed in our neighborhood, near our neighborhood, traffic will inevitably increase and create more safety concerns. As stated in the development plans, there are various connections that they are going to construct that they feel that will disperse this traffic. However, the higher the density of the northern portion of the development, the higher density of traffic that will drive through Hillcrest Heights. Although I appreciate in the staff notes the conditions of having on lots 22 through 25 of Lot 8, which is the house that Mary Bell was referring to that is on the east side of her property as a standalone single-family home, I and my husband do encourage that instead of having quad units, they should continue to extend those single-family homes throughout Hillcrest Trail on the B&J property, which that would include lots 10 through 25 on Lot 8, as well as all lots on Block 9. So it's basically all of the Speedway or B&J, whatever they're called, property, which would provide a lot less density close to our neighborhood, not just one or two houses that butt up against our neighborhood. The second traffic concern I have is the wear and tear on our neighborhood streets. The streets in Hillcrest Heights are asphalt, which are not designed for heavy traffic. We are concerned that the increased traffic from high-density units close to our neighborhood, as well as construction traffic during the development, will take a toll on the streets. As the staff has noticed, there are conditions in place for temporary barricade to be put at the end of East Hillcrest Drive. But this only limits the traffic through Hillcrest Heights until the roads are complete. There's still going to be a lot of construction happening as homes are built in that southern development, and we're hoping that that barricade could either be continued to be put up, that way as homes are being built, construction traffic is not coming through our neighborhood. So to sum things up, we're not opposed to the CUP. However, we do ask that two conditions are put in place. One, only single-family homes are to be built in the adjacent neighborhood on the B&J portion of Hillcrest Heights, which would provide a smooth transition from our rural 1-acre single-family homes to the high-density fourplex units, as well as alleviate traffic and safety concerns. And then the second condition being placing a continued barricade throughout the whole construction project. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ryan Sullivan. I live at 609 Anthony Lane. I also live in the Hillcrest neighborhood, and I serve as vice president of our homeowners association. As has been previously stated, we're not opposed. We're only opposed to certain aspects of the proposed development, particularly the high-density housing that directly abuts our neighborhood. I think as you look at the map, it's significant, especially compared to our large 1-acre lots. And there's portions of that proposed development where there's, I think, 9 lots in a 1-acre area that directly abuts our neighborhood. Very high density fourplexes is what they're proposing. As was previously stated as well, we don't oppose the development. We would ask you please consider adding certain conditions. I won't repeat them. I think my neighbors have done a good job of setting forth what they are. Single-family housing instead of fourplexes, then fade into fourplexes down into the development. That would be a much better transition. It'd look better on a map. It would help to preserve the very rural nature of our neighborhood. And for those of you that didn't take a visit into our neighborhood during that annexation process last year, I encourage you to do so. It's a unique neighborhood. It's why most of us purchased it. And I think it's special to continue to preserve that. In Lincoln, there's not many of them. And as Lincoln continues to grow, it's important that we maintain a few of those in our city to meet that demand. You know, that was some of the discussion that was said by the developer. Hey, we want to do these fourplexes to meet the demand. We're developing to meet this demand, and I think it's important that you maintain that diversity. And our neighborhood is beneficial towards that end. With the conditions in place that have been discussed, including the single family instead of fourplex, some of the issues with the barricades. Barricades, I think, is a big one. If we could get some condition that said, hey, we're going to block off this street until all the construction is done, that would do a lot. We know there's going to be some increased traffic even with single family homes, but for those with children and those, even myself and my wife who walk in that neighborhood, we could probably feel safer with a pedestrian, a minivan or a car come down the road as opposed to a line of dump trucks or cement trucks coming through on a regular basis, the wear and tear and so forth. As you know, our neighborhood is comprised only of 1-acre homes, single-family 1-acre homes. It'd be great, if they would develop more 1-acre homes next to us. Of course, that's what we prefer if we had to say, but we understand that's not economically feasible to do that. This is about money. This developers are in the business to make money, and we get that. If I owned the property, I would be doing the same. But I think as planners, we hope that it's something you all consider and think about the big picture, including our neighborhood, even though we're not yet in the city. We hope that you are considering that as you make your decision today, and to develop that more seamless transition. As people drive through this neighborhood, it won't be such a transition as it goes from acre lots to single-family homes and then further south to the higher density. I will add that we have been working with developers and engineers through this process. We've reached out to them and have scheduled several meetings with them, and I just want to say they've been extremely gracious with their time and sharing information with us. And while we may not agree on some things, we want to be good neighbors. We want to work together with them. And I think if we can have a development plan where we don't have this high density right up next to our neighborhood, and a plan that addresses the traffic issues, the vast majority of our concerns are going to be addressed. Thank you.
Questions?
Ryan, if you, how much of a buffer would you like to see between the Hillcrest Heights development and this development? I mean,
as I look at the map, the section where they have all the fourplex lots, could be single-family lots there. They could even be smaller single-family lots. But fourplex, I mean, they're putting 4 units in the space of 1. So family of 2, family of 4, you have 16 people living on what would be a single-family home.
Can you put that map on the overhead
Sure.
so we can kind of see? If you could just kind of point out to me, like, where
Yeah,
you think,
to White Horse Way right here, which I'm not sure this I think is an older map. We've been told they're not gonna build this. There's plans to not put that street in now. So as it exists now, I think this area here, if they slowly transition into single-family homes, because these are some pretty large lots even here as compared to what you see around Lincoln. But these are quite dense, and I think if you went out there and you stepped it off, how tight those are going to be in there, it's pretty, I mean, it's very similar to an apartment complex that you see around Lincoln.
thank you.
Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Other testimony in opposition? Okay, we will move back then to staff questions. George, if we have any staff questions.
There were concerns brought up by the neighbors about the barricades on the East Hillcrest Drive, and I just want to verify, confirm that those barricades are going to be there throughout construction, but when construction is complete, then they will be gone.
Yes, that's specific recommendation for the barricade originated from Public Works, and that would be for when the street connection is made to A Street. That's the threshold, if you will, for that barricade to come down once the connection would be made.
Okay. George, I don't know if you're going to know this one. Traffic counts between a single-family home versus a single-family attached home, do they differ very much?
I might have to defer that to another staff person.
Do we have Public Works or?
Bob's hiding in the corner.
I was gonna say, I thought I saw him earlier.
I moved to the other side just to keep it confusing. Bob Simmering, Public Works. Generally, we consider a single-family residence would generate 10 trips a day, and it might be slightly reduced in a unit that had just 2 people living in it versus an entire family. So the reduction would be small. So I wouldn't think it's something that should be factored into this point.
So pretty negligible. Okay, thank you.
I have one question that might, the question I have is, can you remind us what is happening at the intersections on O Street that as you leave the Hillcrest Heights area? Or any of those streets between like 90th and 98th?
You mean to the north of Hillcrest Heights?
Yes, to the north there.
I might defer to Bob Simmering on that question again.
Should have asked it quicker.
Bob Simmering again. There is a plan with the Department of Transportation that would eliminate 2 of the intersections being Hillcrest and I don't recall the name of the other one, and there would be a larger intersection between those that would serve both. So in a sense, all that along A Street would be connected parallel to A Street.
Okay, and then further to the north, which doesn't affect this development specifically, but if traffic went through onto O Street, as you're coming north on O from 84th to 98th, is there any major intersection happenings there? Can you remind us of any of those?
There will be an intersection at 98th.
Okay.
At some point. I mean, that's out there ways. There is, I can't recall what the intersection would be, but near the community college access point, and that enters, I think it enters Shadow Creek as well. Other than that, I don't know. I couldn't say for sure what's happening on O Street.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for George or staff? Thanks, George.
Thank you.
Applicant rebuttal.
Thank you. I just want to make 3 points again. Tom Houston, on behalf of the applicant. The first point really deals with the density question, and I think that's really the heart of the arguments being presented here. And the entire CUP settled on the 3 dwelling units per acre with several objectives in mind. Number one, it's approximately 40% of the design standard cap under the community unit plan design standards, and it's approximately 60% of the aspirational density recited in the comp plan 2040. But the primary objective is to have different price points within the neighborhood. You can see on the northwest corner, you can see a street connection to property owned by LPS. And one of the intents and one of the objectives of maintaining that 3 dwelling units per acre is to have different price points within the neighborhood. One of the benefits of having this type of single-family attached dwelling units is that they are a lower price point. These townhomes are really at the $250,000 range. And that was certainly one of the objectives of designing the community unit plan. I want to clarify an additional point on the overall buffering concept, and it could be I just misunderstood Ms. Avery, but I think the staff condition would be is that the 100-foot lot would be on the east side. And on the west side, keep in mind that there is a condition that would require the creation of a 20-foot outlot that would be deeded to Ms. Avery and her husband. And in addition, there'll be a 60-foot street right away. So really, there's an 80-foot separation at a minimum from their potential property to the boundary line of the attached single-family dwelling to the south. And we thought that was the appropriate buffering for the property on the west side. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. We agreed that the barricade should stay in place during construction. It's not going to come down early. I mean, that was never an issue for us.
Questions?
Yeah, can you go back to the map? Well, Channel 5 or whoever does the switch, thank you. Can you show me approximately where that 100-foot is gonna fall on, like lots 25, 24? Just because I can't read those right now.
I can't even read it with my reading glasses. It's my recollection that
It's the first floor, correct?
yeah, I think it'll take up 3 lots. Ooh,
324.
this is helpful.
Right.
There we go. See, that corner lot is a 39-foot width, and the next 2 are approximately 30 feet. So a 100-foot lot would extend somewhere approximately at this property line down here.
When we're talking about, so I'm looking over kind of on the southeast corner of the development. Like Casa.
Galliano.
Those are confusing street names. I did not author them, so.
Those are also slated to be attached single-family.
Correct.
So really, it's only the portion in the middle, like Block 7 around Maricopa, South 94th. Those are going to be true single-family homes and not attached.
Single-family detached homes, I agree with that. In the attempt to have a mix of housing opportunities with the entirety of the neighborhood.
Would the developer be willing to extend that boundary down East Hillcrest Drive any more than that 100 foot?
I would say no. I've had that conversation with them because of the desire optimize the density in that property owned by B&J Partnership. I don't think it's maximizing the density, I think it's optimizing the density.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Tom? Okay, I believe.
Wait, I think Brad might have something to say.
May I?
Yeah, applicant rebuttal.
One of the items for the development that may be lost upon the entire thing of this CUP because it is so big is the different markets. We've talked a lot about the townhome portions. Tom just talked about the attached single family over here. This owner has recently developed the Firethorn area. They anticipate that those products that were done over in that particular area are going to be the exact same, very, very similar Firethorn, Fallbrook townhomes, duplexes, if you will. Here, we talked about the single family. And then on the south side, which was the Rawls piece, those lots are a little bit narrower. They're about 60 foot in width, and anticipate those to be villa type. So half of a attached single family residence. And so I didn't want that to kind of get lost upon. There's a lot of different type of products here, four different ownerships that are trying to do something unique for themselves. And the price points, the townhomes are $250 and up, and the single family, $400 to $700. The townhomes or the attached single family are going to be in the around $400,000 to $500,000. So this is going to be a nice development. I didn't want that to get lost upon some of the discussion here. They want to improve the particular area, and that's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we have 4 items, so we'll need to have motions for each. I don't think at this point we can do that. So, okay.
Do you read each item?
Okay, right, we need to call these separately. So
Yeah.
a motion on comprehensive plan conformance 18001, staff recommendation is for conformance.
Move approval for conformance, Hove.
Second, Core.
Is there discussion?
We discussing everything together, or?
Yes, I think it would be appropriate probably to discuss everything together. So feel free.
I'm going to support the motion and support all 4 motions to approve. I think that I appreciate the neighborhood and especially the folks that live close to this area. They've, they have their acreages and they've invested in those acreages. But, this is within the comprehensive plan. This makes sense. Lincoln is growing and the trunk line is out there and can support the sewer system out there. And I just think that the density of this area makes sense overall. Obviously, the location of where they're putting the higher density is probably not where you'd like it, but the fact is the overall density makes sense.
Others?
Go ahead, Tom.
No, it's fine.
Go ahead.
I'm okay with the switching of the property for the trail. I want to applaud the developers for working with that, because I know that's really important to people that utilize that. And I'm fine with the annexation and the change of zone, but I'm having some problems with the special permit and the density located right by those acreages. Typically, when we see developments, we like to see it go from most dense to least dense and kind of travel along that way. And so I would really like to see less density next to those acreages, just because they have been there for a while. If I could wave my magic wand, I'd move those detached lots closer to those acreage lots so that we could have that ease of transition. So I'm not sure I'm gonna support that special permit at this point.
Okay, Tom?
I'll support all motions. I agree with Commissioner Core and Commissioner Hove that the density abutting Hillcrest Heights is a tough pill to swallow. The reason I will support this, however, is that if we move that density into somewhere else on the site plan or try to suggest such, it's not going to change numbers overall. I think you will have traffic that will proceed north through your neighborhood to get onto O Street. It reminds me a lot of people going through Country Meadows to access Pine Lake. But I don't think that simply transitioning the density from one area to another area is going to fix that problem. We are looking at less density than what conceivably could be approved. And for those reasons, I'll support the motion. All four.
Others? Anyone else? I'm going to support all four motions when we get to them, starting with this first one. I do think density, as everyone has said, is a key component here. What I struggle with is our comprehensive plan asks us to consider more dense places like this or areas, developable areas. And so I feel like as a planning commissioner, I ought to support that notion, that concept. I acknowledge that there's some issues. I appreciate all the testimony that's been given, but I think it's the right thing to do. As Chris said, we've got infrastructure coming in, and it's coming in for a reason, and that's to develop per the comprehensive plan. And I think this plan does that. So I'll be voting in favor of all these motions as we get through them. I think we're ready to vote on the first one.
Okay, this is for comprehensive plan conformance 18009. Staff recommendation is conformance. That was the motion. Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear.
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0. Next item is annexation number 18001. Staff recommendation is for conditional approval.
So moved, Beckius.
Second, Hove.
Any further discussion on this one? Okay, go ahead and call the roll.
Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear.
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0. Next item is for change of zone number 18006 from AG to R3. Staff recommendation is for conditional approval.
So moved, Beckius.
Second, Hove.
Go ahead and call the roll.
Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear.
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0. Okay, last item is special permit 18021 for community unit plan with 290 residential units.
So moved as revised June 19th.
Okay,
Second, Joy.
okay. And I would just note again that this is final action on this item unless appealed to the city council within 14 days.
Any further discussion on this item? Okay.
Okay? Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Core?
No.
Shear.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-1. Okay,
Okay, do we want to take a break or do we want to go forward? I know that Maya leaves in 15 minutes. So what's the pleasure here? Keep going?
Let's keep going.
Let's do another one then.
okay. Next item is item 4.2, comprehensive plan conformance number 18013 to review as to conformance with the Lincoln Lancaster County 240 comprehensive plan, a request to declare Lincoln Electric System property as surplus, generally located at 1040 O Street. Staff recommendation is conformance, subject to conditions. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this item?
I don't see any.
George Wesselhoff, Planning Department. I will be co-presenting with Ed Zimmer from the Planning Department. I'll just briefly give an overview, and then I'll turn it over to Ed for the historic preservation aspects. So this property is located at the northwest corner of O Street and North 11th Street. And this request is to find in conformance with the comprehensive plan the surplus of this property, which consists of 7,100 square feet, to make it available for private sale and redevelopment. And so in February of 2015, the administrative board of the Lincoln Electric System approved the purchase of real property for Lincoln Electric System's operations center in southeast Lincoln, which is currently under construction. And so as part of that, this building at 1040 O Street has been declared surplus. I think you'll note that with the application, there was also a letter from the Urban Development Department, which noted that in 1985, the City Council adopted a resolution establishing this redevelopment area that's generally bounded by R Street, 17th Street, S Street, and 7th Street as part of a blighted and substandard area, and there have been many redevelopment projects undertaken in this area. The last thing I would just mention before I turn it over to Ed is that there are, under the conditions of approval, there is one condition, which is prior to the sale, the placement of a historic preservation easement on the property for the exterior of the structure and the designation of the building as a Lincoln landmark. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Ed.
Ed Zimmer, Planning Department. These conditions, I think, flow directly from the comprehensive plan that encourages when public entities own historic properties, they be exemplary stewards of those properties. And in a case like former post office and courthouse, Old Fed, Grand Manse, when the city put that up for sale, it put significant easements not only in the exterior in that case, but on some of the interior features of that public building. And that would seem a good example for a case like this, where if LES time of using the building has passed, that as it conveys the building to others, take the steps of a landmark designation so that the Preservation Commission would be involved in exterior changes. And if we were to be exemplary leaders as public sector, that further step of the easement for the additional protection, very much parallel to Old Fed.
Questions?
Why, so it says in the staff report that they don't plan on moving until 2021 or whenever their new building is complete. Why are we doing this so soon? Just out of curiosity.
I believe the applicant is here. I might defer that question to them.
Good afternoon. My name is Shanna Sprackling, and I'm the manager of land management, and I work for Lincoln Electric System, whose property address is 1040 O Street, and that's the building that we are talking about today. The reason why LES administration had decided to move forward with the surplusing of this property is we have the LOC under construction. The planned construction is not anticipated to be done until 2021. We put that deadline of 12/31/2021 on or before because we didn't want to be in a pickle as in moving. One of the things that it does do is it gives our ratepayers a little more faith in the process, knowing that we're not going to be hanging on to a building and paying expenses with that building while we have relocated out of there. The other issue is the fact that taxpayers now know that that building will be going back on the tax rolls, that we've got it secured and under contract. With the way the LOC is moving right now, we don't anticipate that we will probably be there till the end of 2021. Weather's been in our favor lately, but that's kind of why we've made that decision. We know that any developer that wants to come in and utilize the LEB, Lincoln Electric Building. We know things that happen downtown usually take time. There's approvals that need to be done. It gives our potential buyer an opportunity to plan for those events. And honestly, that's really not that far away. We're already getting to the point, we're in the summer of 2019, and we could be out of there as early 2021. So that's really not a hard date. It's just a planned date.
Okay. Did you have a question, Tom?
Along the same line, and this may be a question for staff again as opposed to the applicant. Along the same lines as Commissioner Corr's question, is there any sort of guidelines in terms of when a property is surplused? And maybe that's a question for Tim. I don't know.
He's frowning.
You're making him think.
You might have him.
You might have him stumped. Tim C. City Law Department. I don't know that there's a timeline necessarily with when property has to be surplus, if that's the question, but.
It was, but let me back up. Maybe it's not relevant. Is part of the Planning Commission's determination when seeing whether or not this is conforming is indeed determining that it is surplus property, or is the process by which the administrative board deems it to be surplus enough for the Planning Commission to say, well, even though it's going to be used for the next 3 years, it's surplus property?
I guess I think I would say that the Planning Commission's role in this is to say that surplusing this generally conforms with the comprehensive plan. Sure. Not necessarily whether or not selling it is appropriate, or whether or not it was the decision to surplus the property is appropriate, but whether or not declaring this to be surplus is conforming with the comprehensive plan. And then there are other designations. Not to mention, I think this is a recommendation to the next entity to take this up. And so, with that in mind, I guess I think the Planning Commission is making a recommendation as to whether or not this conforms with the comprehensive plan. And so when it does that, I don't think that there's a significant time factor involved in that. And then the ultimate decision to declare it surplus is at another level yet.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Tim.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Another staff question here. I'm just trying to get a general understanding here as to the time frame for surplusing property and what's normal with the city of Lincoln to do so.
David Carey with the Planning Department. I think that to define what normal is trying to bring in a kind of a piece of information on this that probably isn't as applicable as we might think, mainly because I think the fact that LES has provided us kind of a window of when a move will happen is I would consider additional information in this case. It wasn't necessary for them to explain that to us. Normal, if I'm going to try to explain what normal would be that the intention is once a parcel goes through this process to identify it as in conformance or not with the comprehensive plan for surplusing it, I think the intention is that there will be some action on that property. However, I know that there have been some properties, and urban development usually kind of goes through this more than any other public entity. Some of those properties really do sit for many years. Sure. There isn't always a kind of an intention of a project. Sometimes there is, right. And we know that, but we don't always know that. In this case, this kind of falls in between, I would say, where we know that the intention is that there will be a move out of there into their new facility. So we know that information. I think in general, Shanna could probably speak to this better than I can, but I think what they are intending to do is to make sure that it's publicly known that this is what's going to happen. Sure. And then they can move on trying to find the best buyer of that building ultimately. I think the idea is that that's a public understanding, and that really is what this is all about. Exact timing of the normalcy of that, I think, it does vary.
It's safe to say there's no time limit on it being surplus property.
There's no specific time limit on it, no.
Sure.
The request coming before you is to really look at the comprehensive plan to make sure that there are reasons for this to make sense in relation to the comprehensive plan. So that that determination can move forward and then the process can ensue from there.
Sure.
So.
Good? Other questions?
For Ed, sorry. Ed, why not a landmark designation at this point in time? Why are we making this a condition, or sorry, why are we not doing 2 at 1 when we're finding conformance with the comprehensive plan, since LES is surplus?
I think in that we're dealing with the request we've received.
Okay.
We didn't receive a request for a landmark designation. If so, we would have happily processed it since it is our recommendation.
Okay.
But that there's ample time to do that moving forward. So it's not that we're stalling on something we've received. They requested the comp plan conformance determination. In our analysis of it, we made a recommendation, which is exactly the condition before you.
Sure. Sure.
And they're standing beside me agreeing, so
Yeah.
This is good process.
I didn't know if we were anticipating perhaps changes on the 6th floor that may play a role there at all? Because the 6th floor is windowless, is that correct?
On the south and east, but it has windows, I believe, on other, or historically had windows on other sides.
Yes.
It's not in relation to a specific requested change, but rather the underlying change of ownership.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So we are not, I just want to clarify, make sure I understand, we are not putting a landmark designation or historic preservation easement on this now, but it might come forward at a later time.
Our recommendation is to attach that as conditions to your action.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions for applicant or staff at this point? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're finished with that. We'll move on to testimony in support. Anyone, testimony in support? Anyone here for testimony in opposition? I don't see any. Okay, do we have any other staff questions? Okay, do we have applicant rebuttal? Anything you want to say? Okay. Then I'd like to move this on so that Maya can vote. We're ready to entertain a motion.
Move approval, Edgerton.
Second, Finnegan.
We have discussion?
That's subject to conditions, is that right?
So be in conformance, subject to conditions
Yep.
referred to
Yep.
by Ed.
Discussion?
I think it's important to place the historic preservation easement and landmark designation on this property. This does have quite a bit of history for the city of Lincoln, and I applaud LES's efforts to be proactive. That's great, and I think that this just protects the city, you know, so that the next potential owner kind of knows what's expected of them.
Yep. Others? I agree. I think Ed made a great comment that this is a good process. This is the right thing to do at this point to be able to take the next steps. So I'm going to support the motion, obviously. I think we're ready to vote.
Okay, this is for conformance, subject to conditions for comprehensive plan conformance 18013. Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0.
I'd like to take a 5 or 10 minute break, let Maya leave, and we can start back with our.
Supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
They always send us a reminder, and sometimes
Yeah.
we get the time wrong. But it is-
Jerry, do we need to wait for Amy to get back?
I think we can go ahead and get, well, it'd probably be best.
Okay,
She's
we'll wait.
doing minutes.
Okay, we'll continue now with item 4.3A, annexation number 18004.
That's correct. Annexation number 18004 is to annex approximately 42.49 acres, more or less, on property generally located at the southwest corner of West Old Cheney Road and West Folsom Street. Staff recommendation is for conditional approval. The associated change of zone 18017 from AG Agricultural District to R3 Residential District on property generally located at the southwest corner of West Old Cheney Road and West Folsom Street. Staff recommendation is for approval. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed?
I see none. Jesse.
Thank you, Commissioners. Desi Redmond, Planning Staff. So this is the Southwest Village Heights property. To orient you to the property, South Folsom Street is here. I'll give it 1 second to pop up. All right, thank you. South Folsom Street here, Old Cheney, and then Southwest 12th Street here. Like Jerry stated, this is a request for an annexation for approximately 42 acres, and it includes an associated change of zone from ag to R3. This is a phase one of this entire property that is anticipated to develop in phases incrementally into the future. You can see that the existing city limit is currently abutting the property to the south. It is within our city's future service limits, also designated for future urban residential land uses, and the change of zone is consistent with our future land use map. It does comply with our comprehensive plan, and along with an annexation, usually comes how do utilities and services get to the property. A full range of city services can be provided. There is currently water existing along South Folsom Street and plans for sanitary sewer, which are currently not to the property, but there are plans for extensions to serve the area that are planned in the CIP. As you may be aware, with an annexation usually comes an annexation agreement. That agreement is reviewed by City Council and essentially addresses the timing of the infrastructure, so the details of when all of that stuff happens. So that includes sewer, water, streets, trails, and park requirements. And just also one other note for information is in the larger area, there is an existing transportation plan that is getting conducted by Public Works now that's anticipated to be done at the end of August. So that's just something to keep in mind, to look out for information for that. But other than that, I can go ahead and take any questions you may have.
Questions? None? Okay. Thanks for now. Testimony from the applicant.
Good afternoon, members of the Planning Commission. Danae Kalkowski appearing today on behalf of the property owner, Southwest Folsom Development LLC. And with me today also is Mark Palmer from Olson Associates, engineers on the project, and he'll be available to answer any questions you might have. We are requesting annexation and change of zone from AG to R3 for approximately 40 acres located south of Old Cheney and west of South Folsom Street. This area is directly north of the residential property that was zoned way back in 2006 with the Southwest Village PUD project. So this residential area plus the commercial area was included in that project. The area directly to the south was also preliminarily platted then a couple years ago, 2016, and that's the platting that's shown on the area directly to the south. So this area that we're proposing today is really just a natural progression or the next area for growth of single-family homes in this southwest area. Our client is in the process right now of marketing, and building permits are being taken out for the first final platted area down here. They're moving forward with their next final plat. And they found that there's really nice, strong market out here in Southwest Lincoln for more reasonably priced lots to build homes on. So this will just be a continuation of that. We originally, when we submitted these applications, also submitted an application for a preliminary plat that would have shown you the details of the lots, et cetera. We decided to put that on hold at the request of planning because of that sub-area transportation study that Public Works is working on, because it may impact what Public Works decides they'd like to see for West Old Cheney Road and maybe even Southwest 12th Street. I think we've got a unique area out here with roads that are on the half-mile line, not just the mile line, and so they need to take a look at the overall area out here and decide what might be most appropriate for roads. So that is anticipated to be completed, I think, toward the end of August. So you'll probably see us in here this fall with the preliminary plat that kind of goes with this. So you may say, okay, why are you coming forward with the annexation and the zoning right now? Well, really we want to move forward because we want the City Council to be aware that there is continuing growth in this area. If you remember, we were here a couple years ago when this area was designated as Tier 1 Priority B. At that time, Council approved in their CIP the funding out in years 3 and 4 for sewer to be extended to this area. I think the new CIP also shows some funding for the sewer to continue, and we just want the council to be aware that we're ready. We're ready for it. In fact, we'll probably be ready for it before it quite gets here. So that's why we'd like to move forward with these applications now. As Desi mentioned, this area is designated Tier 1 Priority B, contiguous to existing development, can be served by either existing infrastructure or infrastructure that's planned and on its way. We are working on an annexation agreement with the city, and so we will be basically, master planning infrastructure for that entire, I think we have 140 acres there. And in fact, these property owners also own additional property to the north that then they'll be coming in next with their master plan. So those details will be in front of the City Council when we have these applications there also. We're asking for your approval of these items, and then we'll be back in the fall to probably talk to you about the preliminary plat. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions? Don't see any.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. Do we have testimony in support of these items? We have testimony in opposition of these items. Do we have staff questions? Do you want to say any more, Danae or Mark? Okay, then I think we're ready to entertain a motion.
Move approval, Hove.
Second, Beckius.
Okay, discussion?
Seems like a pretty straightforward
Straightforward. Yep,
plan.
good, I agree. Okay, I think we're ready to vote.
Okay, this is for annexation 18004. Staff recommendation is for conditional approval. Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton? Finnegan?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. The associated change of zone 18017 from AG to R3. Staff recommendation is for approval.
Move approval, Hove.
Second, Beckius.
I think we're ready to vote.
Okay, Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Okay, moving on to continued public hearing for items 5.1A, change of zone 18014 from R2 residential district to R3 residential district. The associated special permit 18019 for 21 dwelling units with a community unit plan, and the associated street and alley vacation 18002 to vacate approximately 64 by 40 feet of the West B Street right-of-way, all generally located at Southwest 17th and West B Streets. Staff recommendation for this street and alley vacation is conformance with the comprehensive plan. Staff recommendation for the special permit is conditional approval and approval for the change of zone. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed?
I see none.
Thank you, Commissioners. Desi Redmond, Planning Staff. So this is the City View property. The property is located along West A Street and Southwest 17th Street. You may recall this original request was heard at the May 23rd meeting, and that proposal was for 21 dwelling units. The plans have been revised, and currently we are hearing a request for a new CUP for 14 units, including one existing house, one existing dwelling unit, and 13 proposed townhouses. So essentially, the boundary has decreased in size for the special permit boundary and the associated change of zone boundary. So just as a reminder, the May 23rd staff reports and memos, those are no longer valid. We are discussing tonight the new, today, not tonight. Maybe it feels like tonight, but no, it's today.
Better not get to be tonight either.
If I keep talking like that, maybe. The new proposal. And then just another minor note that there were some minor acreages corrections that need to be made for the final version of the staff report that we can go through as well. So just to talk about the area kind of more as a whole, you can see that there's some existing single-family dwellings and attached dwelling units in the surrounding area. And so really when you look at this project, it would be considered an infill project. To the east here, there is some R3 residential zoning districts, including attached townhomes. And then to the northwest and south, there's existing dwelling units as well. So generally speaking, what's being proposed is similar to what's existing in the area. And with this request, there are also a few waivers that are being requested. 3 of those waivers are pretty common to be requested with this type of development, including the lot to width depth ratio, the lot area, and the average lot width being requested for 28 feet per unit. There's also another associated request with the street and alley vacation located here. and there's existing wetlands in the area. So the applicant is proposing, in order to decrease the amount of grading that needs to happen in these existing wetlands, to vacate part of that street. So that waiver would include stormwater detention facilities, and watershed management has reviewed that waiver and is in support of that request. So again, just to touch on the two associated additional requests, that's for the change of zone from R2, which is existing zoning district, to the R3. And again, those boundaries, from what you heard at the May 23rd meeting, have been decreased in size. When the request came in, there was opposition by this property owner not to be included in the applications, and staff is recommending including this existing property owner in the change of zone only, not in the special permit, basically because our zoning ordinance encourages block zoning patterns to follow block patterns. And so the change of zone, again, includes this property owner, but the special permit does not. And then one other minor note from the May 23rd meeting is the street and alley vacation is just increasing just a little bit from 0.05 acres to 0.06 acres. And again, that is based on the grading that to mitigate what's happening to the existing wetlands. And then just to touch a little bit more on the vacation, you can see this drainage way here and how it abuts the adjacent property to the east. And so there are no plans to extend West B Street. So that is one reason why staff is in support of vacating that property, because to mitigate the wetlands, and also to there's no future extension to extend that roadway. And also one other note, you'll see in the staff report, there's another existing existing dwelling unit that is within the special use and the change of zone boundaries. And along the existing property, staff is in agreement with the property owner that they can dedicate an easement instead of what would typically be required as right-of-way dedication. And that's because there is an existing house there, versus the other parts of the property there's no existing houses, and so we would require what we typically require as dedication. So just wanted to touch on that. And really, that's the details I have for you. So if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions? I don't see any questions.
Thank you.
Thanks. Applicant.
Nate Burnett, Re-Engineering, 601 Old Cheney. Just want to thank Desi and Steve for their work with us since the last Planning Commission. We met with them a couple times as we've revised this CUP boundary. As Desi said, there's wetlands on the east. We have existing gravel roads on the west and north. You may recall that was something that had come up at the last time we were here. With the revised request, we have 14 lots, with one being existing, 13 proposed, and I think Desi did a great job. We will be paving West B Street. We'll be bringing in new utilities along West B Street. Been working with watershed management. You heard they've approved our request for stormwater detention and would be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Don't see any. Thank you. Do we have any testimony in support of these items? And if there is, we take testimony for all three of the items? Just don't limit it to one.
My name is Roger Pearson. My address is 1641 West B. I sold him this property. I've lived there for over 50 years, so I know water issues and stuff there, and I've talked to him about that. There are some other issues related to that. The City Public Works isn't here. They've been working on the road and doing, is he still here? Okay. Yeah. They've been working on Southwest 17th, putting gravel on and getting rid of a lot of the dust. But on the east side of the street, the ditching practically doesn't exist. And so a lot of that water coming from the north runs down and diagonally across my yard. And my ditches need to be cleaned out too, but I've got ditches there. But there's no existing ditches to the north practically on the east side. So I get all the storm water running across my yard, which contributes to some of that runoff that goes down behind these properties that they're developing too. And I'm pleased with what they're talking about doing for that, leaving that area because it's in the 100-year floodplain and leaving an opening through there. The other concern I have, and it kind of relates to Public Works, is on the east side of the property, there's a ditch that goes through there because there's water from some houses up on A Street that are culverted down there. And that ditch is not maintained, and so it grows up and flows down the water flow too on it. So other than that, I don't have a lot of complaints. Once B Street's there, people might be able to find me because the house is 50 feet in, and when they moved the house out there, the city, probably 60 years ago, said, here's your address, 1641 West B Street. It's amazing how many people can't find me.
It's not necessarily a bad thing, though.
Fire department one night.
Yeah, that's true. Good point. Good point.
That's not good.
Other testimony in support? Is there testimony in opposition? Okay, any staff questions? Applicant rebuttal, okay? I think we're then ready to entertain a motion. We'll call these individually.
Yes, the first one being change of zone 18014. Staff recommendation is for approval.
Move approval, Beckius.
Second, Core.
This site has a lot of challenges, and it appears that the applicant has done a nice job taking into consideration those challenges. I'll be voting for all three.
Others? Yeah, I agree. I think this is a good solution. Thank you for working with the planning department after the confusion of the last meeting, and I think this is a good approach. I think we're ready to vote.
Okay, Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Okay, the associated special permit 18019 for a community unit plan. This is final action on this item unless appealed to the city council within 14 days. Staff recommendation is for conditional approval.
Move approval, Beckius.
Second, Finnegan. Finally.
Give it to Dean.
Okay, Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. And the associated street and alley vacation, number 18002, to vacate approximately 64 by 40 feet of the West B Street right-of-way.
Move approval, Finnegan.
Second, Core.
Staff recommendation is for conformance.
I think we're ready to vote.
Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
I think at this time, anyone wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda may do so. If not, we are adjourned. Thank you.